All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Lost in Lorcana podcast. We got a lot to talk about today. But first, let me introduce my co-hosts as usual. We have Jermax here.
Yo.
And coming back now for the first episode for him that's not a production disaster is Oberon.
Hi, y'all.
All right. So we want to go over a couple things today, just to kind of brief y'all on what we really want to go over. Is obviously the 10K finished today. So we want to go over kind of the results. Jermax did participate. We'll go over a little bit of how he did, how he feels, how he felt about it. He'll give us good insight about the second thing we want to talk about, which is kind of our current feelings about the 2-round Swiss format. So he just played it in a 9-round setting. Oberon and I have played it in a more local setting where we've tried it. So we can all put our inputs into that topic. Then we want to go over kind of like how we feel like the day 2 will work for the elite challenges. We didn't go over that really for the last podcast, but updated. I am going to Atlanta. I got my ticket. And if you haven't heard, if you're living in a cave, maybe then you didn't hear that they quadrupled the amount of capacity that they were having. Initially they started with 512, bumped it up to 2048, I believe, 2000 plus. And then lastly we want to finish it off with giving our like kind of power rankings for a few decks that we think are obviously the better decks in the meta right now, and all the way down to a couple decks that are usable. Obviously there are going to be some that are better than others, but yeah, that's kind of a briefing of what we want to go over, and I'm good to kick it off if you guys are ready.
Let's get it.
All right, cool. So, what you obviously see on screen here right now are the results of the pack 10K, which is the biggest prize pool I believe we've had up to date from anything. There was an 8K that happened in Atlanta, I believe, a couple weeks ago. And this is also the largest capacity, I believe, amount of participants with 367. I thought it was a little higher. I don't know if it dropped because of players that dropped or if there were just some that didn't participate at all, so it went down, because at one point I think I saw like 397. But
yeah, if you don't check in, they take you out.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's start off with a couple things. It might be easy to go over the first place finish right away, but let's start with the top 16. Something I want to talk about here is, so we see a couple Amber Steel songs both got bumped out of the top 16. I know that Brennan DeCandio played against Ruby Sapphire. I'm not too sure who this Aaron Rubin played. But I kind of want to go over it. It's quite impressive. Brennan has gone to 4 of the pack tournaments, has placed first in 2 of them. And then the other 2 he just placed in top cut. Do you guys think, just quickly here, so I'll pull up the Steel song that he was, Amber Steel song deck he was playing. Do you think this deck, because we've seen in the last 2 tournaments now, that Brennan last tournament was the only one to make top cut with Amber Steel, and now there is only 2. Is this deck overhyped just because of how Brennan has been performing with it? Or does it deserve the hype it has? I mean, I guess I should say that I forgot his full name is Saeed. The one that kind of went over exactly how to play this deck and made a whole video about it. He did place first at the 8K. I think it was the 8K, either that or like a 5K. So it obviously has the potential, but do you think this is kind of that type of deck where it's gotta have the right pilot to hit that full potential, or is it just really that good? And we'll start off. Oberon, you're just back now, so what are your thoughts on it?
As a Amber Steel pilot myself, I definitely think the deck is as good as advertised, but I think it's one of those where the simplicity can be duplicitous from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can beat any deck in the format sans red blue, and you're only beating red blue if you somehow what's it called, bare necessities, fishbone quell right away. You're doing very aggro-esque.
Sure.
I think this deck is good. I think it's been good since set one. Now, in the context of DeCandio, I think it's the pilot.
Okay.
I think he has been able to overcome all the odds to fine tune his list, and he knows this deck better than anyone else in the current field who is playing regularly.
Sure.
I do believe it's still a tier 1 deck, personally, but if red blue continues to be in the mainstay, this deck will fall out because it loses to ramp right off the bat.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Germax?
I've never piloted this one, so I don't really have too much to say about it. I played against it a few times. It has a little bit of the potential to do the 2-0s, which we'll get into like what you're going to want to be playing and the whole best of 2 format and all that. But as for the hype of it, I'll piggyback off Oberon and agree with what he said.
Sure. And I've tested it out a couple times. Definitely gonna start getting into more grind mode where consistently I'll be playing a lot of the meta decks to kind of field what I like and also to obviously prepare for what I'm gonna be playing against, which is something you all should be doing. If you're going to any elite challenges or want to go to the championships and are taking it seriously and really want the best chance, you should be doing the same. You have to play your opponent's decks, and that's how you're going to know it the best. But yeah, I agree with you. I think DeCandio right now, based on placings, it's hard for me to say that he's up there for sure. Like, he's got to be top 5 for sure. I almost want to say he's leading at the moment, taking home 2 pack wins, which some of the biggest tournaments that we've had thus far, like every single one of them's hitting like 200 plus. I think the first one was the least with like 170, if I remember correctly, something of that nature. And he's performing every single time. Way back during set 1, actually, the Lost Boys, I believe, they had a 5K tournament where they invited a few people out, and Brennan, I know he placed somewhere I believe he placed in top 3. I could be wrong on that. But he placed like top 8 at worst, but I believe it was like top 3. So I do think what Oberon said is correct about it being a pilot thing. He's definitely a really, really good pilot for Amber Steel. He tried out Amber Ruby, not at the last pack tournament, but the one before that, and he top 16 with that. So yeah, something like that. Again, guys, like trailing off of what Germax and I talked about near the end of the last episode, is play what you're comfortable with. Just because DeCandio is placing top 16 every time in all these big events does not mean it's the right deck for you. He sees the lines, obviously. He knows how to play it. And you need to play a deck that you're most comfortable with, where you feel like you could see the lines better, because you'd rather play with a deck where you can see the lines than play one where you can't, that might be better than the one you're playing. If you're not hitting the lines, you're not winning with that one anyway. So, or at the very least, when you meet your match and they're hitting their lines and you're not, it's not good for you. So, kind of moving up. I don't want to go over too much. A lot of this is the same that we've seen from last. Like, the one thing though here, I'll move over to a screenshot we have is of the color combos for the top 16. So for me, I think we kind of went over this a little bit before we started and you guys were talking about it. We're in a pretty healthy state as far as color combinations go. You can see obviously steel is being played the most, and green or amber is actually being played the least, because I mean that's really only being played in amber steel. There probably is a couple other. I think at Germax, actually, I think your first game was against amber amethyst. But it's just not holding up with all this steel that's coming out. It's really, really, really hard to play amber with anything that's not steel, because any other amber deck really is kind of an aggro deck.
Yeah, the ruby one slipped in there at the bottom.
Ruby one? Amber
Yeah,
Ruby?
Amber Ruby.
Well,
Yeah,
Amber Ruby is a deck that people play. I mean, it's not played as much, but it is a good deck. I don't think it's like a really hard deck to play. I mean, we'll get into it later, but I think people are kind of afraid to test it out. You see all these other decks and you kind of get overwhelmed with how much, with all the top 4, top 5 decks. that it's hard to try something new like this, and then you play a couple games and you lose to Ruby Sapphire, and then you're like, I'm just not even gonna play this anymore. But anyway, to kind of go over this a little more, Germax, do you have any specific insights to this graph that you like, or anything that stands out to you?
I think it piggybacks off the conversation we ended with last time of I expected Ruby Sapphire to have the most showing because it was going to be played the most, but we also both agreed that it was what looked like a very healthy format, and I think this graph speaks volumes to top 16. And I was just looking again to like even top 4 are 4 different decks, so then not all of those Ruby Sapphires made it to the end to kind of make that the all or nothing style of deck. So I think I don't think you can ask for a healthier format.
Sure. O'Brien, do you have any other thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think this is what you need. Comparatively to the first 2 sets, we didn't have any of this. We had basically, what was it? Ruby Amethyst,
yeah, Amber Steel
dominating, and Amber Steel dominating every single game. You were playing one of the two, and if you're not playing those, you're missing out.
Yep.
This is what we need. This type of parity is what we're looking for in a health of a game. Like, the more tournaments we see like this, the better it's going to look like, where I don't have to play a deck that I'm not comfortable with anymore. I can play a deck that I like, and I like the play style, and it works for me, and I can still top 8, top 16 with it no matter what.
Sure.
Like, that's the kind of information that a game needs.
Yeah.
Am I surprised that Ruby Sapphire was a 4th of the showing? Yes. This has been my pet deck ever since set 1. I love the deck. But the only reason it's being played so much right now is because there's so much steel. And as soon as people adjust back to playing more of the Ruby Amethyst, or like the Mufasa deck is a very good matchup against Ruby Sapphire, it will shift again. What I think is very curious is that these rankings and these showings are basically helping us figure out what to play at these upcoming events. And so whatever event happens right before the big championships, or happens right before the bigger Lorcana events, I think that will dictate the meta. I don't think people will be going off their local meta anymore as soon as these events become more commonplace.
Sure. All right, so going back to just the top 16, the decks that were being placed, there is the Sapphire Steel that ended up placing top 2. If you know me, if you remember from last week, right now I'm a pilot of Sapphire Steel. I really like Sapphire Steel. I think it's really, really fun to learn. I feel like every game that I lose, I'm learning something. Even when I win, there's certain lines that I see in retrospect that I'm like, I could have played this. I could have gone this route. There's these things that I do. There's new plays that I learn in just future games, and it's always making my brain, think. I'm a very big like puzzle strategy type person. I love when strategy comes into play and trying to like problem solve essentially. And I feel like that's what this deck is constantly. And for a lot of people, that's probably not very fun, having to feel like you're always learning something, so you're never really perfecting it. But for me, it is really enjoyable to play. Does that make it the most optimal? I don't know. We'll go over the decks more specifically and how we feel about them when we do our power rankings. But for this, it is a little strange. The reason I want to go over it is because we don't normally see a Sapphire Steel with the Robin Hood package. We don't usually see it with one jump ahead. 3 Fire the Cannons is excessive. I played 2 of at one point. I think one of is the, at least for me, I enjoy the most. Just because it can be a dead card in your hand, especially when you're playing like Ruby Sapphire pretty much does nothing. But yeah, for the most part, the big differences are the Robin Hood package, and the one jump ahead. And I'm kind of blanking right now looking at this, what it doesn't have. It doesn't have Rise of the Titans. Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't really see. I'll remember in a second what it's not playing where most typical Sapphire Steels are playing. But for either of you, is this an interesting deck? Is this more so interesting? Is this less so interesting? I can actually pull up probably real quick another version of this deck. But yeah, what do you guys feel about that version versus the typical version that I have pulled up here?
Did that other one have Gaston?
Actually, you know, I'll go back to it, but what I do realize is that it didn't have hooks, it didn't have Mickey Mouses, I don't think it didn't have manners either. But let me see.
No Gramatalas either. I don't know if that's really being played too much anymore, but
it's not. No. So yeah, this one actually doesn't play the Gaston. It doesn't play
no
the
Gaston,
Captain Hook
no.
and no manners. Yep. So when you so just at evaluate right now, every Sapphire still is playing Gaston. So that being taken out, I gotta say at one point I did consider taking some out just because a lot of times it was a dead card in my hand. And I felt like I was always pulling it, but now I feel like it's amazing. And especially with combo of Lucky Dime, you get to play the Gaston, get the value out of it, and use Lucky Dime to get the value out of the lore, even if it ends up getting destroyed, which it usually is. But I know that you guys don't really play this deck much, but playing against it, does one stand out more or less than the other?
I love. Oh God.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say I love the Fire the Cannons
Okay.
idea, and I just did a count. So with that current list right there's 18 uninkables. So I see why the Gaston was cut to make a few changes elsewhere.
Sure.
I think the reason why this one did better was because if you were to look at his match history, I don't know if you can do that or not, I would assume that he ran into a couple aggros.
Probably.
And I think that, you know, the grab your swords with the early Fire the Canyons is enough to kind of just seal that door.
Yeah, it does help with they play Cinderella turn 1. You play Hook, they just let the Storm Rage on, versus you play Fire the Canyons, now they have no Cindy. But
and
I mean,
Merfolks, all those.
Sure. Yeah. And how about you, Oberon? What do you think?
I'm surprised by this version. I think it's a little more tame, and I think it's a little more adaptable. You're only running 2 Tamatoas. Like that's just usually that's the all in. That's how you win.
Well, this is Sapphire Steel.
No, I know.
Okay.
I'm saying compared to the other version. And I do like the Fire of the Cannons. I don't like the exclusion of the Hook because I think with Mr. Smee it's a good 1-2 combo.
Sure.
But if you're just using it for value, then it's fine. I've always been pro the Robin Hood package. I know others are not. I just think it brings too much value. That and actually, I just realized this doesn't play the Beast.
That's actually I didn't spot that either. What is this? Okay, well, so typically Tamatoas are not in Sapphire Steel decks.
Okay.
In mine, I put one in. And it's been really helpful in certain situations. And worst case scenario, I get it earlier. Like I don't need it to win, which I get. So I enjoy having one in there. But yeah, normally that's not played in most. And neither are the Robin Hoods, obviously. Yeah. So where the beasts are taken out, that's interesting. And I wonder if it's just because on turn 5, like. He's probably rather play Cogsworth or Robin Hood if he hasn't already shifted Robin Hood. Or if you get the Fishbone Quill off and it stays on the board, you can usually just end up playing Tink if you want to, instead of playing one of the 5 drops and then, waiting to sing A Whole New World on the next turn. I
think it's one of the biggest.
I don't know.
One of the biggest targets in the game right now too. So like if you're getting the beast out, it's going to either get ping damaged or it's just going to be fully removed.
Sure.
75% of the time before you get any value out of it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine though. Like, I would use it for location. If it gets pinged, it gets plus 4, plus 3, plus 4. I would use that to get rid of locations. I still think it has value regardless.
No, I think it has value. I just don't think that I think that one of the things that he was thinking about was, maybe I'll cut the beast because I know that I'm not going to get max value. And I want to try a list where I'm going to get max value out of all of the cards that I play. And, the Robin Hood does live through the, the Along Came Zeus for 5 damage, and you can't hit the Cogsworth. I think it was just like a test that was kind of working out. And then, it ended up working here.
Honestly, a big fan. I've become a bigger fan of it, especially since you have the ramp. And this deck doesn't play the Detective Mickey, but they obviously opted to do the 1 jump ahead instead. But what I like is the hard-headed beast, the one that gets rid of an item. It's
Sure.
come in handy for me a couple times actually. There was a time where I was playing the mirror match and they had the fishbone, and obviously, you know, I want to sing a whole new world, but if I can get ahead as far as the ink, that helps me out tremendously. Or even against Ruby Sapphire, that's really nice. So being able to ramp into hard-headed beast, breaking their popsicle, still doesn't die to Medusa or anything. That helps out a lot because now they don't have the ramp for when I do whole new world. So I do play only one of, but I play 2 Benja and I play one of those. I almost feel like most of the time I don't play Benja. I only really play Benja late game, which makes sense. Like if you're playing Ruby Sapphire and they throw the dime out there, then you can Benja it and play something else. It costs, you know, a little more for the other beasts. So that's what's hard for me to decide whether or not I should take out Benja and just play an extra beast or what I want to do. But let's move on to the first place deck. This will be the last one we go over for the 10K. Obviously important to go over first place. Ruby Sapphire. And I think Ruby Sapphire in general as a color combination has just made waves for this tournament because people notice that it has the largest share of the pie here. 25% is the most of any other color combination, and so that means four Ruby Sapphires made it to top 16. Incredibly impressive, and we'll go more in depth in how we feel about the actual the color combination later on, again when we do our power rankings. But what I just want to say is, like, first of all, congrats to I don't know if it's Christopher, I don't know if it's said different, Anderson, but he's been like a killer in all these pack tournaments and hasn't put himself over the top. He hasn't gotten over the edge yet. And I would say it's safe to say this is likely the tournament you wanna make it over the top. This was probably the one.
Facts.
So but yeah, there's not too much different with this deck. And I'm gonna obviously go to you first, Oberon, because you're the one that's been actually piloting Red Blue since set 1, like you mentioned earlier. And this set has just made it even better with Lucky Dime. And I do want to throw in there, before you give your thoughts on just this deck as a whole, how it performed and how you feel about it moving on in the future. We did spend a lot of time playtesting, and I think before we were playtesting, everyone was using like a 1 of Lucky Dime, if any. And I was trying to make 4 work, and I ended up with 3. So I kind of almost feel like I'm the reason behind playing more than 1 dime. I don't know. I'm just going to throw that out there. But anyway, go ahead again. Give your thoughts on how you feel with the deck, how it feels, where you think this tournament placing is gonna take it in the future. And I do want to shout out my dude, Zero Skater. I appreciate that. Thank you for hopping in. And go ahead, give your thoughts.
So I think that it's gonna warp the next couple weeks, personally. I think a lot of the championships are gonna be playing Red Blue, which, I mean, I might also be playing it there, so I'm gonna be a part of it as well. I think in terms of this version, it's very interesting. Not many people run the shields for sure.
Yep.
Shields are a very unique intake. Only putting 1 Judy Hops versus at least 2 to 3 against other blue matchups, I think is a very interesting choice as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know he did put in the Let It Goes instead of some of the other stuff, which I think is a good place. I run 2 Let It Goes myself. Okay. The 2 and 2 Tremaines and Medusas is a common. The 2 Scars is common with the as many aggro that we have right now. Putting no Gramatalas and putting 4 1-jump ahead is also an interesting take. I've seen it both ways. Some people like it, some people don't like it. So I don't think you can go wrong either way. Overall, I think it's similar to most lists that are out there right now. Everyone has their own flavor and what they like more than others. This one, of course, is like our friend J-Bomb.
Yeah,
he's the first person I ever saw who liked both the Develop Your Brain and the Grammatala for extra card draw. But I think it's becoming more of the mainstay rather than the mass removal package that I use.
Sure.
So I think it's very well positioned moving forward. I still think so. The only real bad matchup it has is aggro, honestly.
Okay.
Aggro is you get hosed, and this one tries to deal with it to a certain extent. I think you run into this is not an easy deck to pilot, I will tell you.
Sure.
So this requires a lot of thinking on when to quest, when to ink, how much you want to go aggro ink. If you're playing steel, do you know if they play whole new world or not? Because once you whole new world, this deck is so much better than anything else.
Sure.
But I think we will be seeing a lot of it. Now, I will say, if you want to play aggro against this, you will beat it. I think you can go Amber Steel with an aggro element. That also beats it. I think the red-purple aggro also beats this. Sapphire Steel, I think, is a 50-50 matchup. And I think the Emerald Steel discard version, it depends on if you have, if they get rid of your Fishbone Quills, use it, or in that sense. So I think this is well positioned, but it's not an easy pile. You can't just pick this up, this deck up and play it.
Okay. I do have some thoughts on what you said about the deck in general. I want to get into them later on. I think y'all might actually be shocked on my take with where I'm at now with this deck, how I feel about it versus where I was before. But Germax, is there anything extra that you want to comment about this?
I 2-0'd it, but we'll just leave it at that.
Did you, for real?
Yeah.
He did.
All right.
Not this guy, obviously. But...
yeah. Nah, he would have mocked you, bro. Don't even play.
Hey, chill.
He would have. He was not letting anyone else get that 2K. He said, "Oh, you said 10,000 on the line. All right, bet. Let me go ahead and pull up my sleeves." So let's move on to the next topic. We'll go ahead and close out of here real quick. So what we haven't discussed, well, I mean, okay, that's actually more of the next thing. But on this one, what we want to talk about is more of where we're at now with the two round Swiss format. So it's not a best of two, but 2-round Swiss. So now, Germax, you played this 9 rounds. We've all played it in a local setting, so we only played 3 rounds of it, but we've tested it. I think in the local setting, some people really like it. Some that are competitive but not ultra competitive, they want to go and they want to win their locals, but they're not necessarily like play testing. They're not going crazy over this like competitive side. And I think those people kind of love the 2-round Swiss just because it gets them out earlier. Games usually finish sooner. Yeah, I get, and it doesn't hurt as bad if you end up losing a best of 3, which for them I think is substantial. So I'll give my thoughts first on how I feel about this. I think the 2-round Swiss is enjoyable to a degree, and where a lot of people are saying, I don't know why you get the extra point for going 2-0. That doesn't make sense to me. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not a great system. What I think they're going for is less position to drop. You know, you're in a certain situation. This happened with you, Germax. You could speak to it yesterday. You're going through, you're getting towards the end. You have a good amount of points, and you 0-2 one game, and I think you have 2 rounds left or 3 rounds left. You have a chance. If you 1-1 and 2-0, we're sitting here thinking, like, where are we at as far as points? Like, can you make it without having to 2-0 both times? Can you 1-1? Can you what happens if you 0-2? Are you just straight out of it? So I think that is gonna prevent people from dropping as quickly as they do, because it's like, oh, well, I went 0-2. It's not the end of the world. I'll just go 2-0 a couple times and I'm right back near the top. So for that, I get the idea of what they're going for, but it does really hurt not being able to play out the full series, going 1-1, and the way I position it to everyone, the way I explain it is like, how much does it suck where if someone goes 2-0 3 games and then they 0-2 the last 6 rounds, they place the exact same as someone who won 1 match in all 9 rounds. And that, when you put it into that kind of perspective, I think it's kind of nuts. And I think my overall opinion, just to round this off, I don't love it. We tried it, and they're going to try it at the Elite. We'll see how it goes. But ultimately, and based off of some other people's reactions, Zach Bivens here, talking about how he wished he could have played game threes with a screenshot of all the 1-1s that he has. He had a couple 0-2s, but he 2-0'd actually 3 times, and the rest was 1-1, and he didn't get into Top Cut. We have Wonderland that just flat out is not a fan. He 2-0'd once and then went 1-1 every other game, all 8 other rounds, which hurts, and he really hopes they scrap it. So I'm going to start with you, Germax, just because you're fresh off of a 9-round tournament that used this format. How do you feel the format is?
So I got a different take than the Wonderland person. I am a firm believer that I don't want to be wasting my time, even in a game that I love to play. I like being in and out quick. I don't think I had a single round go over 18 minutes.
You are also playing a one that's a little more rushy. You're not playing a mid-range control.
True, but so that speaks to the decks that I like to play because I want it to be fast games. I don't want it to draw out and go to the end of time.
Sure.
I finished with pretty much the same as that guy. I had 3 2-0s. Everything else was 1-1s, and I had 1 awful 0-2. And I had a chance to pull it back after the 0-2, but I also think that we're looking at this as to make the top 16, which isn't realistic. That's just for an online event for money, right? If we're going to talk about best of 2 format for the bigger events, we're talking making day 2, which is a top 64 right now, which I think is going to end up being expanded to either more players or a set point system to make day 2. And I think after running the math and stuff, that's still at about 18, 19 points to make day 2, which is still crazy. I don't think that you can really have an 0-2 in this format and expect to make the next day.
Yeah, I mean, if they do 9 rounds, we don't know how they're gonna structure it right now. We don't know if it's gonna be guaranteed 9 rounds. Maybe it's gonna be 10 rounds. We don't know if they're gonna extend the capacity. We'll go into that a little bit. That's actually a branch of this topic. But first, I just want to get Oberon, I want to get your overall thoughts on the 2-round Swiss. I know for you and I, or actually no, you experienced the 2-round Swiss because you played in the tournament before this. I'm the only one that's only played it in a local setting, and I've watched it now a couple times through the tournaments, but you played it. You've played it in a local setting. How do you feel about the 2-round Swiss at the moment?
I think it's draining people. I think a lot of good players who are used to best of 3s are not liking it, and it's forcing them to not want to play anymore. And that's what you want to avoid. You don't want to make it so polar. I get what they're doing, right? They want to have some equality. They want you not to have as much of an advantage from going first. They want to prevent people from dropping. But if doing all of that makes people not want to play anymore, you've lost the message.
Sure.
So I'm okay with it. I think Jeremax is right. Like, you can do all these things. If you 0-2, then you suck. Like, you can't do anything else anymore. And you have bad matchups. Like, that is how the game works. So it's definitely possible for you to 0-2. I mean, I'm personally okay with it for like one big tournament. And then after that one big tournament, they're like, this ain't working and we're scrapping it. I just need to hear more willingness and ability for them to change the rules if necessary. And they have been for the tournament, but that's not the rules of the tournament, right? They're just doing it from an event perspective.
Sure.
But if they're going to say that we're going to do this long term, you're going to turn a lot of people off this game, unfortunately. And that's very risky. So I don't love it. I also play decks that are favored game 1, or if I can. But I think it also warps what you can play. Like, if you are not favored on the draw, then you are going to lose, and you cannot play that deck.
That was a point that J-Bomb, you mentioned earlier, a friend of ours mentioned. It's like it causes you to try to find the deck that has the best chance on the draw now at this point, which is true. And I mean, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I think if you have a deck that's good on the draw in Disney Lorcana, I mean, you're probably set to win most of your games, whether it's best of 3 or this 2-round Swiss format. You're just in a good spot if that's the case. But yeah, it's tough, and you don't want especially the people that are ultra competitive, the ones that are really playing to make the top money and that are showing up every single event, making a name for themselves, to start disliking the game because of the type of format, and it's just not working out. Now we know day 2 is going to be best of 3, which is great. It does kind of suck. You don't want to see all these people talking about how they're not a fan. I think they are open to changes, and I know they're for sure doing this 2-round Swiss for Atlanta, which is fine. It's one event. I think if it does not go well and there's a lot of outroar between amongst the community, especially amongst the very competitive community, I think they've shown enough for us to have faith in them that when the time is right to switch, if it makes sense, they will do it. They've so far shown us that and made us happy. So I can't. They haven't done anything to make me believe that they wouldn't change it if it looks like that's the better route that they need to take. But yeah, so Germax, it sounded like you wanted to kind of say something.
I just got a little side note for that too.
Yeah.
So like the Zach's post that you have pulled up right now, I don't know if he could speak to this, but I also, when you have that many 1-1s, you also have to ask yourself, did I make a mistake that could have made it a 2-0? And me personally, I had, over the course of the 9 rounds, 5 of which, so the 0-2, I could not win. That was probably the worst drawing of cards and mulligans that I've ever had in any deck in any game. And it just so happened to be back to back in the same round. So I kind of just wiped that one off. But of my 5 other 1-1s, I think I made 2 really bad misplays for not having full practice of the deck, where I could have swung the 1-1 to a 2-0. And obviously, that changes. If I do that, then I play somebody else, and you never know what's going to happen. Butterfly effect kind of thing. But I wanted to make mental notes throughout the whole thing of how many mistakes am I making that's costing me games. And I believe I had 2 that cost me from a 1-1 matchup to make it a 2-0 matchup. So, you can't just be mad at a format and you're going 1-1 a bunch of times.
Sure.
But if you're making mistakes that could have been a 2-0 and you're right into it, then don't blame the format. Blame being a bad player.
Sure. All right. So I do want to move on real quick. We'll branch off of that. Don't want to go too deep into it because I want to start getting into the power rankings and going over that. But real quick, do we think that are they gonna change anything about Atlanta? Is it still gonna be 64? Do we think they're gonna increase it? I would hope that they at least expand it to 128, like the top cut. They'll have to make Sunday will go on a little bit longer, but every round is being divided by 2 anyway. It shouldn't be that big of a deal, in my opinion. Now, instead of like Saturday being a full day and Sunday being a half day, maybe Sunday's also a full day, or maybe it's a 3/4 day. I don't know. But do we think they're gonna switch it? I hope so. I think they will make it 128 for day 2, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think I want to see. Well, let's first day 1 first. I think I'm a fan of doing 10 rounds, 40-minute rounds, kind of like they did with the Pixelborn tournament, and adding a round just because you're going to have 2,500, or however many, 1,500 to 2,500 players. I'd like to see, as like the full test, 10 rounds at 40 minutes. It's still a quick day.
Sure.
For a in-person event, and then seeing what the point breakdown is going into the next day, and maybe that makes it an even more solid 64, or either bump it up to 128 or do like Pokemon does. They do top 64 or X amount of points, whichever is greater. So I think they have a couple ways to do it. I don't think they'll change it. I don't think they'll change the day 1, but I think that they're going to be forced to change the day 2. Because resistance is going to count for way too much with 1,500 people cutting to a 64.
Sure.
I think they make it 128 personally.
Yeah, I think they have to. I don't
Not
really
even
care. Yeah, go ahead.
Competitive perspective, you have to.
Sure.
Like, if you're saying, okay, 64 out of 2,000 people is 3%? No, what is it? 30%? Whatever it is.
It's not 30, I'll tell you that. It's not 30. I'll look it up right now, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it is 3%.
3%, you said?
That nothing.
Yeah.
3% is nothing. Like,
Yeah.
it's usually top 25% make it, right? And top 25 would be what, 400 people? Now 400 is too much, I think.
Yeah.
But 120, you can even go 256, right? And I think they'll have enough printing available of all these cards. It'll also make it really happy for a lot of players who will be there and be like, oh my god, I got a promo even though I didn't do the greatest.
Sure.
Wait, you think that a quarter of the field should make day 2?
No. He's saying that's too much, but he's just saying 256.
10% nearly.
See, the 10% is my magic number because anywhere you play poker to make the money, it's always 10% of the field.
Okay, that's fine. That's probably 10% of the field making it.
Yeah, it's still good. It's whatever. I mean, I don't know how you do the math. It'd go from, let's see, so 256 to 128, 128 to 64, 64 to 32, 32 to 16, 16 to 8, 8 to 4, 4 to 2.
That's fine. That's still 6-7
so
rounds.
It's like 7-8 rounds. It's basically you would have to do Sunday for a whole day.
Yeah, instead of being able to get out early.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. It's what all the other games do.
It's a double whole day versus Saturday would be a whole day. If they did 64, Sunday would be like a half day of even. Okay. I mean, it's all speculation. I agree. I would be fine with 256, 128. I don't even think they necessarily need to print more of the promo cards. If it's still top 64 for the cards, whatever. I'm not. It doesn't matter. If they do increase it, fine, cool. Like, that's awesome. You made it to day 2. Like, should you get a prize in theory if you make it to day 2? Sure. But they have it set to 64. It's not the biggest deal. I'd rather them make it 256 and they don't have enough or they can't print extras and they do 256 anyway than them being like, oh, well, we only have 64, so we're going to only move 64 people over.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't really care. Like, I do want a prize for making day 2, but it's okay. We were all under the impression that top 64 was going to get that anyway, and it is what it is. I don't think people will complain about that, at least for the first event, and then they can adjust for the next. Moving on. All right, so here I have a little Photoshop thing I kind of threw together here. I'll pull it up on the screen right there. There's my Photoshop editing abilities, very minimal.
Did that take 8 hours?
It took me about 30 minutes. But anyway, so it actually just happened to work out where 4 of the I pulled out the top 8. There's going to be some here where I think we're all going to agree are on the bottom part of it. But I am interested to see what we're going to see on the top. But I did want to put out every color combination that I feel like you can go to an event and you can do well. There's obviously some where you're going to do better, so on and so forth. But let's go ahead and we're going to start out hopefully you guys ranked out. If you're just going to do it off the top of your head, whatever. I have my rankings for each one individually, and then at the end I'm going to tally up, and go based on the rankings as a collective how we all feel about each color combination. So starting off, we're going to do Sapphire Steel, and I'll go first on where I have this placed in my power ranking specifically. And also I want to do a quick little shout out to my boy on YouTube. He commented, his name is Nintendo, brought up a good idea. Let me go ahead and pull up actual deck lists when we're talking about them, just so he was saying he was still not too sure what deck he should pull up, so he wanted some examples. So here you go. I'm gonna have examples of every single deck, not necessarily the one that I exactly how we all feel it should be, the exact cards, but there's a deck list if you want to make it and kind of test it out and see what you feel about it. Anyway, I have Sapphire Steel in my rankings, and this might shock you. I kind of don't want to do Sapphire Steel first because whatever, but I have it ranked 3rd. I have it ranked 3rd in these 8 meta decks. My overall feeling with Sapphire Steel is at a certain point, a deck's got to be, no matter how good a deck's potential is, if it's that hard to pilot and it's that collectively agreed upon that it's that tough to pilot to a point where even some top players don't want to even try it because they are afraid they will not see the lines, that's got to dock you some points. It has the potential, I think, to beat any deck, including Ruby Sapphire. It's obviously a weakness against Ruby Sapphire. It does have the potential if things go right. But yeah, it's at my third, and I play this and I pilot it and I love playing it. But I think I have a good reason for my number 1 and 2 as to why Sapphire Steel is 3. So I'm gonna leave it at that as why it's my number 3. We'll start off for Sapphire Steel. Germax, where do you kind of have this in your top 8?
I got it at number 2.
Number 2. Okay, we're not gonna go over what's number 1 or anything yet. We'll put that later. So I have it at 3. You have it at 2. Any particular reason how you feel about this deck? Why it's number 2?
I said it was pretty much the best last week when we talked, or whenever we recorded last. I just think it's got a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Especially this list, I'm liking even more now that I'm looking at it than, looking at what yours was when I was kind of using that as the picture of what I think Sapphire Steel should be.
Well, yeah. So when I pulled it up earlier, that I specifically I was going over that one because it was a little unique. This is a more typical. This is your standard Sky. I think Sky might use this exact one. If you don't know who Sky is, he's a content creator. He really Sapphire Steel is his baby. That's what he's piloted. He's a top player in the community right now. And this is really close to his exact deck. But Oberon, where do you have this placed? How do you feel about the deck overall?
I got it second as well.
Okay.
I think I agree. It's very adaptable. But this deck is not one of those you just pick up. You got to know the play lines like the back of your heart. And I think it's positioned very, very, very well in the future.
Okay. All right. And so for the next deck that we'll be going over is Ruby Sapphire. So Ruby Sapphire for me is number 1. I have it at number 1, and it's not. I was actually already thinking about this before the event happened yesterday. I think Ruby Sapphire has really adapted, and I know it's struggling. And Oberon, you could talk to it more than I can, and you play it more, so you feel it more. But I feel like as time goes on, this deck has been getting better and better against aggro. I've seen this deck play against aggro, have enough, with the Maui and the Queen of Hearts, and then eventually to Scar or Be Prepared. Like, it has enough gas to kind of stop aggro at 12, 13, 14, and kind of like what we saw with Ruby Amethyst from set 1, when it was, Ruby Amethyst was the control deck, was dominant. It was okay if your opponent got like a 12, 13 lower lead on you at the beginning, because the point of yours was control. Once you got to that point where you could clear the board and you didn't have to worry about them questing and having a full board anymore, you could start individually picking them off. At that time, with Ruby Amethyst, you had Ursula, you had Elsa, you had Maleficent Dragon, you had B-Prep. Here with this Ruby Sapphire, it's kind of similar, but you have, your Maui's to stop the early game, Queen to stop the early game as much as possible. You have Fishbones to ramp, one jump ahead to ramp. You have the Shield of Virtue, which is a little different. I do like in the case where you do get use out of it and you can swing into something, ready it back up, swing into something else. And then you get to that point where you play B-Prep or you play Scar to clear an aggressive board, and you just lucky dime to the W, or play Lady Tremaine or Madame Medusa. So for me, it has, with the ramp and with the lucky dime, it has kind of every tool that you need to help sustain until you need to get to where this deck is truly trying to get to, which is the combo deck of lucky dime, or just a control deck with the Lady Tremaines and the Maleficents and the Madame Medusas. So for me, that, with all that thought process, that ended up at number 1. So Oberon, I'm going to start with you this time for Ruby Sapphire. Where do you have it? Why do you have it there?
I got it at 3.
Okay.
The reason I have it at 3 is, while I agree with you in the sense of it's been better this time around, and I think the real boost that it got was Lucky Dime and Madame Medusa, in terms of where it was before. The reason why I have it below Sapphire Steel is they can ramp faster than you, and while you have more removal, they're not going all in on the removal.
Sure.
If they're gonna win off of bells and lucky dimes and stuff like that, because they're gonna get more cards through Holy World, so will you, but they have ramp faster most of the time.
Sure.
Because you're running both the Mickeys and you're running one jump ahead, and so are you. But I think the aggro, while there is some argument that aggro is doing well, this deck is better positioned against aggro. I think that if you don't have either a Queen of Hearts or a Maui or a way to get faster, you are done. There's no way for you to go around it.
Sure.
Like if by turn 4 is your first real play, that's GG.
Okay.
Versus with Sapphire Steel, I can go ahead and either like deal 1 to 2 damage, or hopefully get to a tank or get to a grab your swords faster than I can with this. So
Sure.
I have it at 3. Now I'm gonna probably keep it at 3.
All right, Germax.
Third.
You have it at third. Is it kind of for the same reasons that Oberon has it? Do you have your
100%.
own?
Nope.
Okay.
100%.
Awesome. All right, so we're gonna go on to Amethyst Steel, which is a little different. I don't even think we saw an Amethyst. I closed out the screenshot, but I don't think Amethyst Steel was in the top 16 for the pack tournament. However, it's had a couple good showings. One, Zach Bivens, you saw I had his tweet pulled up before, very good player. He brought it to a local, I forgot if it was like a 1K or 2K, something of that nature. He placed 4th. And this is Zan Syed, the guy I was talking about earlier with Amber Steele, who put out a video on exactly how to play it. He has a literal, like a Google document or Excel sheet on every mulligan for every color combo you're playing against, all that for Amber Steele. He decided he was going to mix things up at this 1K in Atlanta, and he ended up placing 1st with this Amethyst Steel. So it's kind of like a control-y, like more of a mid-rangey. You have the bounce package stuff still with the Steel. It's very tempo. It's very, I think it's kind of cool. It says there's 8 and then along came Zeus. It's obviously a mistake. But it's interesting. It looks fun to play. It looks enjoyable. We've seen iterations of Amethyst Steel, and this is not the general Amethyst Steel that we'd seen when set 3 came out initially with the Jafars and everything. This is a little bit more optimized, I believe, and a little more focused and less combo heavy. And so I do like that a lot. And I haven't seen it be played. I haven't played it. I haven't played against it. So I can't give like a real direct personal feeling of the deck. So I'm basically going over how it looks, what my general thoughts are about it compared to if you're playing someone good with some of these other meta decks. I personally have it placed at 8th for now out of the 8. But again, we'll start with you, Germax, on this one. Where do you have this ranked for you, and how do you feel about it?
Can you pull up the one that actually did well in the tournament real quick?
There was an Amethyst Steel in the tournament that did well?
Yeah, there's one.
Yeah, in the top 16. Oh, I thought you had the website pulled up. That's okay.
I did not, but I'll pull it up here. But it placed top 16, you said?
Yeah.
I did not think it did. No, it didn't. Amethyst Steel? There's none.
Yeah, it's in the chart.
Go down a little more.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, wow. Okay. All right, here we go.
Yeah. I'm gonna go. Damn, I have to see. Can you go to your little options sheet again?
Options sheet?
The 8-hour long thing that you made. I'm gonna put that at 6th.
6th.
Okay. You're gonna make me get a pen and paper. Hold on.
You got it at 6. What's the reason for that? So obviously there's a couple behind it. Why do you have it not at 8? Let's just say, because I have it at 8.
I think it has potential.
Okay.
I don't think that the full correct build is there yet, but I think it has potential.
For sure. I think it does. This has the bosses on a roll. Does not have the Sorcerer's Spellbooks like the other one I have pulled up. This one has a Rafiki, which I'm kind of interested in. I kind of like that. Gives it an extra rush character. You do already have Mim, but obviously with Rafiki, you don't got to bounce anything. So I think the benefit of having Rafiki, as well as if you're playing like Ruby Sapphire, something that's taking a little longer to get where it needs to go, you could just play Rafiki instead of Madam Mim on 3 if, let's say, you don't have Maleficent or Merlin, and now you're just filling the board even more versus having to bounce something back, which I think is a mistake a lot of people make when they're playing a deck that takes a little longer to get to their ultimate goal. People will still, like in Ruby Amethyst, do the bounce with the snake, and it's like, dude, you don't, as you have to, you really don't need to do that. But anyway, Oberon, what are your thoughts overall? What do you have it ranked?
So I got it at 6 as well. I have played against the deck at the NRG 1K where I top 8'd.
Oh, shoot, yeah.
It was the go-to deck. I think it was right after Blevins had won that everyone was playing it. Okay. It was a pain for everyone else because this had so much just you could get around so many things. The only thing was Ruby Sapphire beat the crap out of this because I'm just gaining more. Yeah. And a lot of them were playing Whole New World at the time. They're not anymore. I like this deck. I just don't love a lack of Elsa. This I saw this recently with this guy, the Razul.
Okay.
It's very interesting. I have it at 6. I think there's a couple decks that I don't like, lower it, but I think it's pretty good to play. I think this is a much more interesting one to play though.
Okay. All right.
And it's not Jafar. I think Jafar's trash. So I'm all in on that.
I think it definitely is not as good as we initially thought. All right, so we're on to Amethyst Emerald or Emerald Amethyst. So for me, this had a strong showing. I don't want to hurt your feelings here, Germax. I know you're more on the Emerald Steel now, but still, I know this is your baby overall. At the end of the day, it's your day one. I think where it's at right now is 7th. I know it still places top 16, and in the last couple pack tournaments, it got first in Swiss, and it placed 2nd, I believe, in the last tournament. I think it was the 2nd place. I don't know if it does well. It performs well. It's been consistently performing well. Either 1 or 2 iterations of the deck has squeaked into the top 16. But I think it's at a point now where it's just not fully optimal. I think a lot of it has to do with, I do truly believe the befuddles. I think that is, I hate to do it. I don't like giving Germax credit if I don't have to, but he did bring up the befuddles in these decks, and I do think it's very effective. I don't want to keep saying more about it. I don't want to keep boosting his ego about this because he'll never let it down. But I do think that is a good play, and people aren't playing it because I do prefer this deck in a more aggro heavy, which, I mean, it's aggro. Like, I'm not an idiot. Like, obviously, this is an aggro deck regardless, but I like it when you have those combos, like keep Curse Merfolk on the board as long as you can, throw on the Flynn Rider, befuddle, like go super aggro until it becomes a point where you could just play your goat, bounce your goat, and get there. But Oberon, I'm going to start with you. With this deck, where do you have it ranked? Oh, I don't know if I said where I placed it. I placed it at 7th in case I didn't mention, so it's 7th. But Oberon, where did you place it and why do you have it there?
I also have it at 7, and the reason why, it was the tier 1 deck when it first came out. When I remember that was the deck everyone was playing. It won a tournament right when set 3 was released. Mm-hmm. But it really relies on you getting friends on the other side to have any sort of card draw and or rabbit. And I just think that, like, it is aggro. It is probably the only, I will say in the top 8, it's the only viable aggro because I don't believe Amethyst Amber to be a viable deck.
Same, which is why I don't have it included. Yeah.
I think if you want to play aggro, this is the way to go. Because it has more, but I just think there are better decks than it right now.
Sure. Germax, you pilot this deck. This deck you've been playing with all the way up until recently when you started doing Emerald Steel. How do you feel about this one? Where do you have it ranked?
Yeah, the one you got on the screen, I'm not a fan of. I like the more aggressive route with the Pinocchios and the 1-drop Maleficents. I think that is just a better deck. Mm-hmm. But overall, I have it ranked 5th.
And when he says the Pinocchios, he means the ones that quest for 3, Obviously, this one has a 2-drop Pinocchio as well that does the exertion. But yeah, so where do you have it?
Fifth.
All right, so we have 7 and then 5th. All right, cool. So moving on to Emerald Steel, your current baby. With Emerald Steel, I enjoy it. I played it a little more than some of the others. Sapphire Steel, Ruby Sapphire, I would say I played the most, and then this would be the third one where I was playing a good amount with. And it's fun to play. The lines aren't super difficult, I don't think, to see. There are definitely some situations, because for me, this deck is very much your aggro, you're removing, and then your aggro, you're moving, and what did I say? There was 3, and discarding. Those are like your 3 things that you're gonna do with this deck, and it's just figuring out which one to do at what time. You have a mulligan of maybe a mix of these things. Which route should I go? Should I go towards more of the straight aggro, which you're kind of always doing for the most part, like with the Curse Merfolk? But like, should you keep those sudden chills when you have Merfolk and Flynn? Is it going to be effective? And in a deck I have a couple Hypnotizes. Might need to take them out. I'm not too sure, but for me, it's like, do I keep the Hypnotize? It feels really inefficient. But maybe I have Prince John, so maybe the double draw is worth it. But then for the removal, do I play the Ursula? If I do the Ursula, am I just going a straight damage route? Obviously it's based on what you're playing as well. But it is fun because you have multiple options. You have that flexibility. However, if you don't get into the draw, if you don't get into the Prince John, and the discard stuff, or if they're able to remove it without having to swing into it, if you put out a beast, which I noticed this one doesn't have the tragic beast in it at all, and if you put out the beast, hopefully it stays on the board. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's where I think it sucks, is that there's a lot of times where you're in top deck mode and you don't have the greatest stuff during top deck mode. Or this has beast, I'm sorry, this has beast, this doesn't have Tinkerbell. So that's better. I think that's better. If you're gonna have one or the other for this deck in particular, I think Beast is a little better. But yeah, that can hurt a lot when it's in top deck mode. So for me personally, I have this set at rank number 5, and we're gonna start this time with Germax. How do you feel?
I still got some work to do on my list. I think there's a couple different variations you can play that are just kind of itching to get in there, and for that reason, it's number 1.
There's no way, dude. Stop. You can't do that just because you're biased. Don't do that.
Hey, you're asking for personal opinions out here. Are we starting to judge?
This is gonna get power ranked higher than it should. All right,
Oberon, are we judging now?
Who I imagine is gonna be a little more logical in the reasoning and unbiased. Where do you have it, and why do you have it there?
I got it at 4.
Okay.
That's not too far off from 1.
Okay, sure.
Okay. I got it at 4 for a couple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, this is such an annoying deck to play against.
Yeah.
Just from like a mental warfare perspective, this is, whenever I see this deck, I was like, I hate playing this game. But even more so, I think you don't even need the Prince John for sure to make it work. I think that's probably the best payoff that you have. But there's a reason why it's so adaptable, and like, unless you have a lot of card draw going on into your deck, which most decks do not have, this deck is a backbreaker, and it'll win by itself without needing to do anything else.
And Ursula Deceiver is she's such an underdog. If you play her right at the right moments, so good.
So as a result of that, I think it's definitely in my top 4. I would easily take this deck up and go to a tournament and play it. It's the new bully, I would think. There's a lot of new Speci just came out with a version that a lot of people seem to really like. And you will see a lot of this at the championships because people are very gung-ho about it. I just don't think it's better than the other top 3.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Next, we have Amber Ruby. I think Amber Ruby is a little bit of an underdog player here. Not too many people talk about it, but it always does squeak one into the top cut at least. And I think it's a fun deck to play. Obviously, Mufasa's fun to play. For me, it's always fun, like, just the risk and the reward, the idea. I do think for the most effective version of this, you do need to play bare necessities. You do need to play a couple cards that are not characters, and it sucks because it's Mufasa. There's even a point to make, I think, where this deck could potentially do just as good, if not better, without Mufasa. I think a lot of people's hesitation is the fact that they feel like playing Mufasa means they can't play anything that's not a character. Obviously, you want to limit. If you're going to play Mufasa, you don't want to have half and half. Otherwise, at that point, there's no point to play Mufasa. But I do think that causes a mental block for a lot of people, and that puts them in a position where that it's one of those things where they feel so forced to adjust the amount of characters and non-characters because of Mufasa, where it's like, is it even worth the mental block for that? But I do like overall. I like the Mother Gothel into the Rapunzel. You can play it more aggro. I like the dock. I do like a version where you play Pluto. You use the ability of Pluto to go into dock, and then you use after that. Hopefully, if you can keep Pluto on the board for one more turn, Pluto plus dock plus the 3 ink, you shift into big Pluto. One of our friends actually lost his chance to get into top 16 at the last event because he played exactly into that combo. I like that. Not a huge fan of Pongo, to be honest. He can work in some cases, but again, I'm just not a huge fan of him. But yeah, I have it placed at 6th. For me, Oberon, we'll start with you. Where do you have it placed and why?
I unfortunately have it at last.
Ooh, you have it at 8th. All right.
Yeah. The reason why is more because of how I rank the rest of them.
Okay.
From a personal perspective, I think you can play this deck at any point in time. I think it doesn't really have bad matchups.
Okay.
The problem is it doesn't have good matchups either. It has decent matchups, not something you're going to write home about, unfortunately.
Sure, I agree. Yeah.
So as a result of that, you are playing a little bit of a lottery. Like if you don't get a good thing off the top, that's going to suck. Now, I think I would play Perdita instead of Dipongo in this deck, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
And it does, like, okay, other than the Rapunzel Mother Gothel combo for card draw, that's all you really got.
Yeah.
And maybe you can run a Stitch if you're good enough to do that, but you're stuck afterward.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, I think that, is it viable? Yes. Is it tier A deck? No. Is it tier B deck? Yes. But I unfortunately have to rank it 8th.
Okay.
Because that's ranked everything else.
Sure. All right, Jermax, your go.
If you're playing this deck, you might as well just go enjoy your day doing something else. I got it in last. I think it has some potential, but not right now.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. Just either play something else or don't play at all.
Okay. All right. Now we have Amber Steel. Amber Steel, second to last, the penultimate deck that we're gonna go over. So this one for me, I'm happy. I went over some of my top decks and now some of the lower ones, and I get to go back to a top deck. I really enjoy this deck. I even think that a Pride Lands version that has been kind of making waves is very interesting, just because of the fact that when you do play Ruby Sapphire, which isn't the greatest matchup, now you have things like Bare Necessities, which looks like, okay, this one is playing Bare Necessities, so I was going to be incredibly shocked. But you have Bare Necessities. You do have like the Queen Shift to be able to play a whole new world really quick and mess up your opponent's game plan. So there's a lot of factors to it. And again, with the Pride Lands though on turn 2, that kind of sucks for a lot of people. I mean, trying to deal with it in turn 2 or 3 is incredibly hard. Rise of the Titans is really the only thing that can deal with it that early. Otherwise, you gotta wait till turn 4 and then along came Zeus, unless you're ramping like Ruby Sapphire into Maui. Then you can swing into it, but you gotta swing into it with 2 things because it has 7 health. So I really like Amber. I think it has the ability to play aggro, mid-range, or control. Depending on what matchup you have, you can literally select whichever 3 you need to select, and you just play for the given matchup that you have at that given time. And for me, that almost screams the most versatile. I don't think there's any other deck out there right now that can be all of the above, like I just mentioned, aggro, mid-range, and control, if it's piloted correctly. And so for me, I have this ranked at number 2. I do have it behind Ruby Sapphire for the reasons I mentioned before. I do still think Ruby Sapphire has the upper hand. If their Fishbone Quill gets destroyed or banished by the Bare Necessities, that hurts. Same thing with Sapphire Steel. I do like the Sapphire Steel matchup against it a little bit more than Ruby Sapphire against it. You have a little more options to it, but the Bare Necessities, if it kills your Fishbone, man, it's really, really hard to come back. Plus, they have the Cinderellas to destroy your Cogsworth game plan of keeping Cogsworth up in a steel mirror match. So it's really tough. It's been tough for me when playing against it, but yeah, I have it at number 2 overall. Where do you have it, Oberon? Go ahead.
Shout out Brennan DeCandio. I got this number 1 overall.
Whew. Number 1 overall. Okay.
Yeah. The reason why is similar to what you were talking about. It is so versatile. Like, the only way you are losing with this is if you get whole new worlds out, all of them, and you are just playing against something that's ramp control. I think the only bad matchup this deck has is Ruby Sapphire, and even then, you can get them if you get rid of their Fishbone Quill.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy it just from the sake of, like, it is so versatile, and that's what you need these days. DeCandio's version, of course, he's been destroying everyone these days, and he knows exactly what he's doing.
Yep.
But there is a reason why that exists. There's a reason why it is in the top 8 every single tournament. Yep. And it's been consistently that way since set 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with Bare Necessities, it's a whole new level now. Also with Along Came Zeus, you got straight up removal that you didn't have for big creatures. It's no longer like, oh, if I play a Maleficent, I'm screwed type deal. I think it's the best deck in the format. I might be piloting the one of these. This might be in the consideration for one of the decks I pilot in the next couple weeks.
Okay. And Germax?
I got it at 4th.
Got it at 4th. So we have a 1, 2, and 4. Okay. 3-way tie going on here. All right. And is there anything further you want to explain? Why do you have it at 4th?
Yeah. I don't know.
Just cause.
Just cause
you're the 3 before it you think are better.
Yeah. I know I'm going to be alone in that thought, but I think that I don't think this is going to have a strong showing in Atlanta, and I'll be the first one to say it.
Okay.
Really? What's up?
I just think that I don't know.
He has no real reason.
I know you said
he just thinks it's funny.
I think aggro beats this deck too.
You think so? No way.
I mean, I 2-0'd it once. I don't know how good the pilot was.
Not very good, I don't think.
I have not gone 0-2 against this, and at worst, I'm 1-1.
Okay.
A turn 2 whole new world is second to none.
Yeah, but also like there's Cinderella. That just, man, that hurts. If they're going first, especially, and they play Cindy and they have the Let the Storm Rage on, just killing whatever you play first, and drawing an extra card, and then kind of just sustaining from there. I think if that's the play, if they go first, if we're talking about like the green steel you play or the Emerald Amethyst, if they play Cindy and they're going first, I think it's almost an auto win if they have the storm, especially if they have let the Storm Rage on, if they have multiples, or if they have that combined with strength. That's a tough matchup. But all right, we got it. That's your opinion. We got it. We're gonna move on to the final deck.
You better get a lot of them because Ursula's ripping them from your hand, buddy.
Okay. So we got Ruby Amethyst. The previous, I don't know, honestly, overall the entire tournament, I don't know if this is still the most played, but man, Ruby Amethyst, I feel like every week to week thoughts on it change, but the deck doesn't. I mean, I still have I guess I'm gonna go back on what I just said, but I have a pretty consistent feeling about it. I think it's pretty even across the board. probably the most consistent matchup, the one where you have the least bricks. If you are playing a discard deck, it is tough. It can be tough to play against. Last set, the way that I ended up being able to get the best of like the Floodborn discard that made waves, and actually Zero Skater, who was in here earlier, if he's still in here now, let's go Emerald Steel. Yeah. He was the one that really made it big to a point where Zephyr made a deck about it. I really just adapted and realized whenever I play that, or I need to make sure that I'm always having Rabbits, Maleficent in my hand, Friends on the other side, and just making sure, like, because they were playing Bucky and Prince John, and they never wanted to quest with them. So it was like, all right, I don't even really need to play any characters right now. All I need to do is draw until I get to be prepared, and then the game's mine. So, I mean, nowadays, discard's not played as much. Emerald Steel has a version of it. It's still tough to play against. And that's probably like its toughest matchup, I would say. I don't know if, off the top of my head, it's probably the toughest thing, having to deal with that. But it's pretty consistent all across the board. I think it has a pretty decent chance to beat anything, but also everything else has a pretty decent chance to beat it. So I have it placed on my rankings at number 4. I do think, I don't know if people disagree with me or not. I think it's a pretty easy deck to pilot. It's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty straightforward curve. It's very hard to brick with this deck. There's always something to play, and I think it's hard to really make a bad play. I mean, you could just be really like a really poor player and really not know how to play it. But if you're semi decent, you can pick up this deck and learn it relatively quickly, in my opinion. And for that reason, that's why I have it at 4th. So Oberon, starting with you, where do you have it and why?
I got it at 5.
Okay.
4, 5 is probably and I had Emerald Steel at 4, so that makes sense, right? If Emerald Steel can beat it, I'd probably put it below. This deck was the bane of my existence, set 2. And honestly, set 1 too. But like, I could not deal with this at all, set 2. It seems like it's got more out. Other decks have more outs against it this now. Now, a good pilot with this, I think I disagree with you for a certain extent of like this is an easy deck to pilot.
Okay.
With the bounce shenanigans, I don't think it's as easy as you think it is.
Okay.
I don't.
Sure. Maybe it's just that I played it literally for the 95% of set 2 that I've just learned it enough.
Correct. That's probably what it is. But I think that this is, as we've been seeing on Pixelborn, it is the most played deck. And it's consistently the most played deck. Maybe that's just people being comfortable with it, and they're like, sure. Oh wow, I got a couple new toys, I want to play this now. Or maybe it's because it is better. But like, as we're seeing, it's not necessarily winning tournaments anymore. It is played a lot, but it's not winning tournaments anymore.
Sure.
So therefore, people have figured this out. And if you don't have one matchup that you're going to consistently beat every single time, why play a deck?
Yeah.
Right?
And a big downfall of this one is it doesn't have item removal, so it's not removing Fishbone, it's not removing Lucky Dime.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how any Sapphire deck beats it. You go as fast as you can, play Lucky Dime, and you hope to survive.
Sure. All right, Germax, where do you have this? Where does it land and why?
Well, at 7th.
At 7th? Really?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
We're going to put a little bit of
before?
Not having the full list of what the 8 decks were going to be. But also, I'll just go out and I'll just say that I think people are going to stop playing it.
No way.
Nah, yeah, there's no way.
I'm entitled to my opinion.
You're entitled to your completely subjectively but low-key objectively wrong opinion. I
think that I think we're going to start seeing less of it played, and then I also think in turn that means less are going to be in the top cut.
Okay.
That's hot take for Atlanta. Same Steel Song and Red Purple are not going to have the showing that everybody thinks. Clip it, put it out there.
I almost
drag me if I'm wrong. I'll put my Cash App if I'm right.
I almost think that by default it's going to have a relatively decent showing because I think a lot of people are going to play it. I do like the point that Oberon made, and I've made it in the past, that because of how dominant it was in set 2, it forced a lot of people to have to play it if they really wanted to compete, which then made a lot of people comfortable. And now it came out, like you said, a couple new toys, throw it in the deck. You don't really got to switch up that much of what you're doing. And it's pretty easy to just input some of these new cards and play it like you were before. Just, again, with a couple new shiny toys you can with Queen's Castle, and it's fun to play. And very annoying to play against at certain moments. But yeah, all right, I have it all fully loaded. Let me get into the full screen mode here. Bop bop. All right. So
is this gonna do it automatically?
No, I have
based
to move
on
it.
our percentages.
I'll move it. I don't
is
have
there like a calculator that you use to like
programs. I'm not a program like that.
Okay.
But all right. So a clear last place we had was Amber Ruby. So that was at the bottom. I don't know why it's not fitting the size, but hey, it's all right. Wee Ball. And at a pretty definitive, I mean, they're close. So Amber Ruby had 22. Amethyst Steel with 20 is going to be 7th. And then at number 6, we have Emerald Amethyst. Oof, that's got to hurt you a little bit. Germax.
I mean, I had it at 5th, so.
Okay. All right, fine. Ruby Amethyst we have, because I'm pretty sure Germax used 7 twice, but we're gonna go with it anyway. We have Ruby Amethyst.
No, I didn't. I have it all written down right here
at 5. Next at 6, do we have a clear 6? Or sorry, not 6. What am I talking about? 4th. We do. Okay, Emerald Steel. That
disappointing. I don't know if I'm going to be on any of these calls going forward. I'm just kidding.
All right, man, this looks janky. I forgot to adjust these blank space sizes. And then, okay, so this is tough. We have a 3-way tie. So,
of course we do.
We have a 3-way tie. We're just gonna have to go on gut here and what we feel. Out of these 3 decks, let's put a vote in. Everyone has to put in a vote. Who do we think is 3rd? These are all my top 3. I have Sapphire Steel at 3rd. I don't think anyone else has Sapphire Steel 3. You know what? This is good. I have Sapphire Steel 3. Oberon, I remember you have Ruby Sapphire at 3.
Yep.
Germax, you didn't actually make a list and prepare for this, so you can kind of roam freely. I got it at
4th, so I'm just going to say it's at 3rd. I'm just saying 3rd for Amber Steel's 3rd.
Oh my God.
I have it 4th on my list.
We can't do that. All right. You had it 4th on your list. You had Amber Steel 4th. All right, this is what we're going to do. Where did you have Amber Steel? You had it at number 1, correct, Oberon?
Yeah.
I had it at 2. Man, we each... Oh, you know what? Germax. You don't have... None of these are your number 1. So Amber Steel is your 4th. That's like your least.
Right? Blue Steel is in my 2nd. So Blue Steel is the 1st of that list.
Unfortunately, that's going to have to cement it. Oh. Amber Steel is at 3. Amber Steel's at 3. I don't think it's terrible. At the end of the day, these are...
Excuse me.
These are all pretty interchangeable in my opinion. These are all pretty interchangeable in my opinion. So here, we're not going to go with who's 2nd. We're going to vote on who's 1. I have Ruby Sapphire at 1. And neither one of you had these at 1. So between these two, does anyone think Sapphire Steel is 1 over Ruby? You think so, yes. Oberon, right?
I do.
Oh, do you also, Germax?
Yeah, I have Blue Steel as number 2 on my overall.
You did say that. You said that. All right. Well, Sapphire Steel is going to take the number 1 spot in the current. We'll say current in case we want to go back and adjust these. In the current meta deck power rankings for the Lost Lorcana podcast, Ruby Sapphire is going to be 2nd. So this is where we have all the decks at the moment for the power rankings. Would love to hear whether or not you agree or you disagree. But yeah, we're closing in on an hour and 30 minutes. So this was a really good podcast. Some really good what is a conversation about just the pack, and like the 2-round Swiss and all of that, everything that we went through. And this was a fun little thing to close it off on. do we have anything else we want to go over real quick or say?
No, pretty good. I think my points are going to stand. I can't wait for Atlanta.
Okay, I'm ready to see if you're right.
We got Tour Championships before that, and that's going to really show us what the meta's looking like.
For sure.
What people think the meta's looking like, at least.
For sure. Shout out to my boy Zero Skater. I don't know if you've been in and out or if you've had it on the whole time. Super duper appreciate the support. If you're watching this on YouTube,
let's go Emerald Steel, bro. Yeah, I just saw the comment.
We go live. We said Amber Steel so low. I know, dude. I have Amber Steel at I have it at 2. Oberon has it at 1. It's this weird guy Germax. Just so happened to have it in his last, so that's how it panned out. You've had it on the whole time. Appreciate it. Well, so this is gonna go up on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, you guys can, if you want to come over, follow. Right now we don't have a set schedule. I know it should be more so, but right now we're kind of freeballing it whenever we have time. And but if you follow me on Twitter, which I'll have in the description, I'll post every time we're gonna have a podcast in case you want to watch it live. You can follow Johnny DB on Twitch. Also will be in the description if you want to watch it live. But otherwise, Purple Steel, my bad. Yeah, I know. All the way down there at 7. It had a good showing today, though. But we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, so for everyone on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. If you guys have any questions, we'll try to go over it on the next podcast. Any feedback is super helpful. Appreciate everyone that tuned in to the stream today. Appreciate anyone that's tuning in on YouTube. And with that said, I hope you all have a great day.
Peace.
Peace.